that.
Well, we talked about also this book doesn't have any of the cover has something that, but there are no strips. One, because sort of permissions issue. Two, you kind of don't need them, and it was likening it to the last book that I think the one before this was about the Beatles. It was writers taking individual Beatles songs and kind of anatomizing them. And there was an issue of, oh, we can't really quote the lyrics, again, because of permissions issues. And then we realized you don't really need them. If you write about Hey Jude or Penny Lane or Eleanor Rigby, like you have it in your head, you don't actually. So here, if I say Lucy's lemonade stand or Linus's blanket or Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football, you have it in your mind's eye, or you don't, and it's probably not something for you, right?
Well, lots of people have it in their mind. Remember during the Second World War, the Germans would send people over and I think before the Battle of the Bulge in Allied uniforms, and that'd be the kind of question you might ask them. Does it go back that far? No, it doesn't. But nowadays in Vietnam, that'd be the kind of, so who's Charlie Brown?
Yeah, right.
You think you're an American? Who's Charlie Brown?
Well, that's it. Also, this question of like, is it just which of these topics that we take on in our books are are sort of quintessential American and sort of don't translate or transcend or transport? And at its height, I mean, the Peanuts strip was in dozens of countries and translated into 20 some odd languages. And again, why is that? Is it just because the universal themes and the characters, and there was something kind of that we could all relate to, as opposed to what people say, as much as baseball is the national pastime. If it's a book about baseball, you're not going to sell it in a country where baseball isn't known or popular. Maybe.
And the World Series is held in this country.
The World Series, right?
But also, I think that I don't think you can place to maybe you disagree, but accessibility was you never felt that you weren't going to be up to reading a Peanut strip. Doonesbury, who I love, but for one thing, I have to get my glasses out to read the dialogue, but sometimes I struggle with that.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, it's fine. You remind me the way I feel about being a literary agent. I don't wake up and think I'm not up to or for going to work these days, because if it's something that you, especially if it's something that you feel like you're an advocate for and the ceiling for it is here and you're still here, there's just so much upside and you want to actualize that potential or whatever it is. But with this, I mean, it's I think maybe part of the answer or the appeal is it works on different levels for different people. The same way I remember one of my brothers, Peter, who's a writer, was 4 years older, and so when I was a freshman in high school, he was a freshman in college, and he came home for vacation one time, and I saw his reading list, and there were a lot of the things that were on my reading list, and I mentioned something about that, and he said, oh yeah, but I'm reading it at a much different level. And you can do that too. I mean, I can sit down with my son, who's going to be 5 in a few months, and have to explain some things and other things not.
Well, you mentioned haiku, which is which is interesting, because we just had a guy who writes haiku on the show, and haiku you really can read and not get. It's very easy to pass over a good haiku and not see it. You have to read it again.
Right. Here, I don't think there's anything you're not going to get. You just might not think it's as funny, or you might not get the subtlety.
Or it's profound. But it's persistence. It's always having been there. And I always like if somebody makes room for melancholy, I always write. I mean, everyone used to read the Russian novels. Everyone in a Russian novel is depressed.
Right. But you don't expect it in a comic with a cute dog and sort of funny, ostensibly funny characters, and then you have a lot of. I mean, it's funny in publishing, people try to glean these lessons, and when I think who was the first Seinfeld, maybe the comedians who started writing books, and they were doing well one after another, and then a couple didn't do well, and somebody said, well, what's the disjunction? What's the difference there? And what somebody divined was, when it was a comedian who was writing about sort of a dark past and abuse and alcoholism or whatever else, which was very heartfelt and meaningful and valuable. But when you go out of your character, like they want you to be who they know you to be, which I don't think is a good thing or right thing, but it's just sort of the lesson that was gleaned. Here, it's just, you're not won over by Peanuts because you're surprised that you're consciously thinking, oh, this is surprising. These are children who are talking and thinking like grown-ups.
But it was just always, I mean, it was like the Palisades or Gravity or something. It was just always there. And
well, the way,
very easy to read.
When you've come back and said that a couple times that way, it makes me think of, again, some of the subjects of the other books have done. Central Park, you know, it's just something, whether it's a place people have gone to celebrate or mourn or meditate or whatever, something, the constancy of something. And the Beatles, they did, you know, even though they weren't together for a long time. And that's something else that, you know, I got from a generation above me that I'm passing on, you know, the constancy of something. You know, I didn't grow up with the habit of reading Peanuts every day or even every Sunday. But I think there is something comforting, even unconsciously so.
Absolutely.
And the fact that that it is an evolving story. Again, the person that said it's like a 50 years, it's the longest running story that we know. It took 50 years to tell. And you know, they made a movie out of it, which...
He never excluded either. He never excluded. You never felt excluded.
Oh, you never felt excluded.
You never felt
excluded. I mean, there's other, right. You may not have been able to relate when you're, you know, a really little kid to what unrequited love is, but, and you may not have thought, oh, you know, in 1968 when Franklin, who was the first black character, was introduced, which was brought about because a school teacher in California wrote to Schultz, and again, it was 1968, saying it might be a good message, a good thing to do to have a black character, given what's going on in the country.
This is why we have Token in South Park.
Oh, I don't even know about that. See, is that so?
There's a black kid.
And Schultz was on record as saying, like, he liked the idea, but he didn't want to do it sort of in a patronizing you know, gratuitous way. And fortunately, he did it, and it didn't come off that way. And you know, even there's a piece in the book here by Jennifer Finney Boylan.
Yeah, she's supposed to be a terrific person, right?
She is.
I've never met her, but she's supposed to be a terrific
I mean, I'm lucky that I've gotten to know, or I knew beforehand, or I've gotten to know some of these people. And
Anna's a good friend of hers.
Oh yeah.
I read that first book, which I'm still troubled by. But I'm glad I read it, and I'm glad she wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, she makes
explain who she is.
Well, she's I don't know how she would describe herself in what order, but she's, I mean, in no particular order. She's a New York Times op-ed columnist.
But she was a teacher at Colby and best friends with Richard Russo, who was another comic writer. And then he decided that he was a woman.
And she makes reference, Jenny Boylan, Jennifer Finney Boylan makes reference in the context of her piece here, talking about a Peppermint Patty who was sort of a trans kid without knowing it or having that kind of language. But Jenny's been married to the same person, I think it's 30 years, something like 18 of which is a man and 12 is a woman, which is not the point of the story, but it sort of puts it in context. So, you know, on the one level you have Peanuts, which is this sort of quintessential 1950s ultra-white Midwestern comic strip, but which even the fact that if you put it in the context of the times, the fact that Lucy was such a strong character, she might not have been likable, and to the contrary, but Schultz was actually ahead of his time, and he felt very strongly about women's representation, actually.
Yeah, Lucy has no complaints. I think
she has no complaints, and she has a lot of complaints.
No, but I mean, she.
It's in terms of being depicted as a strong, independent.
If she felt something, she said it. If she.
And you know, if anyone ever felt any sympathy for her, I guess it would be that she was so rebuffed by Schroeder, who also was in love, but he was in love with Beethoven.
Yeah, but we needed you needed Lucy. The cartoon wouldn't have worked at all without Lucy.
Right. Right.
Anyway, it's a lovely book. It's full of. There's a wonderful thing talking about brothers. There's a wonderful thing by who wrote the corrections? John. There's a wonderful piece by Jonathan Franzen, which was just heartbreaking.
It's
beautiful.
It was.
Beautiful.
I would have wanted to do this or try to do this anyway, but it just became telling and auspicious and validating that so many great writers.
Well, they wrote about. It's weird because they wrote very, very personal stories, but really about peanuts. I don't know. It's odd. I don't know quite how that happened, but they did. Yeah. So it's a wonderful book, and maybe the clock will turn and start going backward, and we'll be so well prepared. We'll know when the war is going to end in Vietnam. We'll know what horse to bet on.
Right.
Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. Well, isn't people's ideal to sort of live backwards? People to apply what you've learned your whole life? And
I think that I feel very strongly now that life is a circle instead of a line. I used to think it was a line. Now I think it's a circle. Man. What do you think?
No, I think you're dropping that in when we're short on time. we could really dig in with this.
It's a lovely book. It's full of delicious essays, and it's about something, just essential part of our culture, an essential part of the world. Life. Anyway, come back with another book that you're passionate about.
I'd love to. Thank you.